He was buried alive and left to his fate, but when he showed up at the door of his former home, his owner's reaction stunned everyone around. The rain fell in merciless sheets across the abandoned construction site on the outskirts of Mapleton. Lieutenant Marcus Reed hunched his shoulders against the downpour, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the scene. Yellow police tape fluttered in the wind, marking off a rectangular section of freshly disturbed earth. Two uniformed officers stood nearby, their expressions solemn beneath the brims of their rain-soaked hats. "Tell me again how you found it," Marcus said, his voice barely audible above the storm. Officer Jensen, the younger of the two, stepped forward. "Anonymous call, sir. Came in just after midnight. Caller said they heard whimpering from this site while walking their dog. Thought it might be an injured animal." Marcus nodded, his gaze fixed on the muddy hole where his forensics team worked carefully despite the rain. "And what exactly did you find?" Jensen swallowed hard. "A German shepherd, sir, buried alive in a shallow grave. Someone had bound its legs with wire and—" He hesitated. "There was a gunshot wound to its shoulder. Non-fatal." "Jesus," Marcus muttered. In 23 years on the force, animal cruelty cases still affected him more than he cared to admit. "And the dog?" "Alive, sir. Barely. Animal control took it to Valley Emergency Vet Clinic. Dr. Sanderson is treating it now." Marcus nodded, making a mental note to check in with Lisa Sanderson later. They'd worked together on enough abuse cases over the years to develop a mutual respect. "Any ID? Microchip?" "That's the thing, Lieutenant," Jensen said, exchanging glances with his partner. The dog was wearing a military-grade tactical vest, partially buried with him. It had insignia from a private security firm called Sentinel. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Sentinel? The outfit that runs security for half the corporations in the city?" "Yes, sir. We've already put in a call to their headquarters." Marcus turned his attention back to the crime scene. Rain continued to pound the earth, washing away potential evidence with each passing minute. "Bag everything, and I mean everything. When you're done here, I want you both at the vet clinic. That dog is our only witness, and I want an officer with it at all times." As Marcus walked back to his unmarked car, a sense of unease settled in his gut. This wasn't a typical case of animal cruelty. A trained security dog in a tactical vest, shot and buried alive. Someone had gone to considerable lengths to eliminate a very specific target. On the other side of Mapleton, in an upscale residential neighborhood, Elijah Holt sat in his home office, his fingers drumming restlessly on the polished mahogany desk. At 62, Elijah had the trim physique of a man who made physical fitness a priority, though silver had long since claimed his once dark hair. As CEO of Holt Pharmaceuticals, he'd built an empire worth billions, but tonight, his customary confidence had abandoned him. The storm rattled the windows of his sprawling mansion, but the tempest outside was nothing compared to the turmoil within. His cell phone lay before him, screen dark. He'd been waiting for a confirmation call that hadn't come. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, quickly composing his features into a mask of calm. His daughter, Sophia, entered with a steaming cup of tea. At 34, she had inherited her father's sharp intelligence and commanding presence, though her compassionate nature was entirely her own. "You should get some rest, Dad," she said, placing the tea on his desk. "It's almost 2 in the morning." Elijah offered a tight smile. "Just finalizing some details for tomorrow's board meeting. You know how it is." Sophia studied him with concern. She'd noticed her father's unusual tension over the past week, the hushed phone calls, the late nights locked in his office. As Chief Operations Officer at Holt Pharmaceuticals, very little happened in the company without her knowledge, which made her father's recent secretiveness all the more troubling. "Is everything all right? You've seemed distracted lately." Elijah waved away her concern. Just tired. The Novatech merger is taking more out of me than I expected. Sophia nodded, though she wasn't convinced. Well, don't stay up too late. Reynolds will be here at 7 to drive you to the office. After she left, Elijah let out a long breath. His daughter's intuition had always been sharp, too sharp for comfort at times like these. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "It's me," he said when the call connected. "I haven't heard confirmation. Is it done?" The voice on the other end was low and measured. "There's been a complication. The package wasn't properly secured." Elijah's grip tightened on the phone. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we have a situation. I'll handle it personally." "See that you do," Elijah replied coldly before ending the call. He sat motionless for several minutes, the implications of this complication cascading through his mind. Everything he'd built over decades could crumble in days if things went wrong. Too many people had already been sacrificed to protect Holt Pharmaceuticals' secrets, including, most recently, a German shepherd named Ranger. At Valley Emergency Vet Clinic, Dr. Lisa Sanderson worked with focused intensity. The large German shepherd on her operating table had already defied incredible odds by surviving both a gunshot wound and being buried alive for what she estimated was at least 6 hours. "Blood pressure's stabilizing," her assistant reported. Lisa nodded, her gloved hands steady as she removed the last fragments of the bullet from the dog's shoulder. "He's a fighter, this one." She glanced at the tactical vest that lay on a nearby table, now bagged as evidence. Military or police dogs usually are. Once she had closed the wound, Lisa stepped back to assess her patient. Despite his ordeal, the German shepherd was a magnificent animal, purebred, powerfully built, with a distinctive black and tan coat. A small white patch marked his chest, barely visible beneath the surgical draping. "Let's get some more fluids going and start him on antibiotics," she instructed. "I want round-the-clock monitoring." As her team continued their work, Lisa stepped into the hallway where Officer Jensen waited. "He's stable," she reported. "The bullet missed any vital organs, thankfully. He was severely dehydrated and hypothermic when he came in, but we're addressing that." "Any idea how long until he's conscious?" Jensen asked. "Hard to say. His body's been through extreme trauma. It could be hours or days." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. This dog has a microchip." Jensen's eyebrows shot up. "You were able to scan it?" Lisa nodded. "Standard procedure. He's registered to Sentinel Security Services as his vest suggested. But here's the strange part. According to their records, this dog, Ranger, was reported deceased 3 months ago. At Sentinel Security Headquarters, Nathan Drake reviewed the security footage for the 5th time. As Director of Operations, it was his responsibility to ensure that nothing compromised the company's reputation for excellence. The grainy video showed a figure in a maintenance uniform entering the K9 training facility at 11:42 p.m. 2 nights earlier. 47 minutes later, the same figure exited, leading a German shepherd on a leash. Nathan paused the footage, focusing on the dog. There was no doubt in his mind. It was Ranger, one of their most highly trained assets. The dog that, according to official reports, had died during a training exercise 3 months ago. A dog that now, according to the police call he'd received an hour ago, had been found buried alive at a construction site across town. Nathan closed the video file and picked up his phone. "Sir, we have a security breach," he said when the call connected. "Asset R7 has been compromised." "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll handle it personally." As dawn broke over Mapleton, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean. At Valley Emergency Vet Clinic, Ranger's vital signs had stabilized. Officer Jensen had been replaced by Officer Patel, who sat drowsily in a chair outside the recovery room. Inside, Ranger's consciousness slowly returned. Pain radiated from his shoulder, but his highly trained mind quickly assessed his surroundings. The sterile smell, the beeping machines. He was in a medical facility, not the cold, suffocating earth where he'd been left to die. Ranger's military training had prepared him for extreme situations, but nothing could have prepared him for the betrayal he'd experienced. In his mind, fragmented images played on repeat. The handler he'd trusted leading him from his kennel, the sudden pain in his shoulder, the darkness closing in as dirt covered his body. But stronger than these traumatic memories was a single driving instinct: to return home. Not to Sentinel, where betrayal awaited, but to the only human who had shown him true kindness during his training. With careful movements, Ranger began removing the IV line from his leg with his teeth. Officer Patel jerked awake at the sound of crashing equipment from within the recovery room. By the time she flung open the door, all that remained was an empty bed, disconnected monitoring equipment, and an open window. Ranger was gone. Lieutenant Marcus Reed slammed his car door shut, his face tight with frustration as he surveyed the veterinary clinic. Yellow police tape now cordoned off the building's perimeter, and uniformed officers combed the surrounding area. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Marcus approached Officer Patel, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Walk me through it again," he demanded, his voice measured despite his growing irritation. Patel straightened her posture. "I was stationed outside the recovery room, sir. The dog was stable but unconscious when I took over from Jensen at 6 this morning. Around 7:15, I heard a crash from inside. By the time I entered, the dog had already escaped through the window." Marcus glanced at the window in question, a narrow opening approximately 5 feet off the ground. A wounded dog managed to remove its own IV, climb out that window, and disappear without you noticing until it was too late? "Yes, sir," Patel replied, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Dr. Sanderson says it's extraordinary given his injuries, but apparently military-trained dogs are capable of—" "I know what they're capable of," Marcus interrupted. "That's why I wanted an officer with eyes on him at all times." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "Any leads on where he might have gone?" "We've alerted animal control and all local shelters. We're also canvassing the neighborhood. So far, nothing." Marcus nodded, his mind already working through the implications. A highly trained security dog with potential evidence about who had tried to kill it was now loose in the city. And whoever had buried Ranger alive would likely be looking for him too. "Double the search radius," he ordered, "and get me everything you can find on Sentinel Security's K9 program. I want to know exactly what makes this dog so special that someone tried to put him in the ground." Across town, in a modest apartment on the east side of Mapleton, Emma Chen was running late. At 32, she had the focused energy of someone perpetually juggling too many responsibilities. She hurriedly packed her laptop into her bag while trying to eat a piece of toast. Keys, where are my keys?" she muttered, scanning her cluttered kitchen counter. As a former veterinary technician who now worked as an animal behaviorist specializing in rehabilitation, Emma's apartment reflected her passion. Dog training books filled the bookshelves, and framed photos of her with various canine clients adorned the walls. A worn leather leash hung by the door, a remnant from her time working with military service dogs before a budget cut had eliminated her position at Sentinel Security. Emma finally located her keys under a stack of mail and rushed toward the door. She was due at the shelter in 20 minutes to evaluate a recently rescued pit bull with socialization issues. When she pulled open her front door, the last thing she expected to see was a German Shepherd collapsed on her welcome mat. Emma froze, her keys dangling from her fingers. The dog lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his rib cage. Blood had seeped through bandages on his shoulder, and his powerful body was caked with mud and debris. Despite his condition, Emma recognized him instantly. "Ranger?" she whispered, hardly believing her eyes. At the sound of her voice, the dog's ears twitched slightly and his eyes opened, fixing on her with a gaze of unmistakable recognition. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, her trained eye quickly assessing his condition. The fresh bandages suggested recent medical care, but the torn IV tape on his leg and his obvious exhaustion told her he had traveled some distance to reach her. "How is this possible?" she murmured, gently stroking his head. "They told me you died during a training exercise." Ranger whined softly, pressing his muzzle against her hand with the last of his strength. Without hesitation, Emma lifted the 90-pound dog into her arms and carried him inside, her scheduled appointment forgotten. As she laid him carefully on her couch, questions raced through her mind. Ranger had been her favorite during her time at Sentinel, a brilliant, sensitive dog with extraordinary capabilities. When she'd been laid off, she'd tried to adopt him, offering to pay any price, but was told it was against company policy. 2 weeks later, she'd received word that Ranger had died in a training accident. Yet here he was, alive but gravely injured, having somehow found his way to her doorstep from across the city. Emma cleaned and redressed his wound, administered water with a dropper, and covered him with a blanket. Once he seemed stable, she reached for her phone to call her former supervisor at Sentinel. Her finger hovered over the number, then withdrew. Something wasn't right. The professional medical bandaging, Ranger's desperate journey to find her specifically, the fact that she'd been lied to about his death, all of it suggested something sinister. Instead, she called the local emergency vet clinic. "Valley Emergency, how can I help you?" answered a harried voice. "Hi, this is Emma Chen. I'm an animal behaviorist. I'm calling because I need to speak with Dr. Sanderson urgently." "I'm sorry, but Dr. Sanderson is unavailable. We have a situation here." "Let me guess," Emma interrupted. "A German Shepherd disappeared from your clinic this morning." There was a startled pause on the other end. "How did you know that?" "Because he's currently on my couch." Within 30 minutes, Emma's apartment was filled with people. Dr. Lisa Sanderson arrived first, medical bag in hand, followed closely by a serious-looking man who introduced himself as Lieutenant Marcus Reed. 2 uniformed officers secured the perimeter of her apartment building, while a forensics technician took photographs of Ranger, who remained on the couch, watching the proceedings with alert wariness. "Remarkable," Dr. Sanderson murmured as she examined Ranger. "He's traveled at least 4 miles in his condition, navigating through an urban environment to find you specifically." She looked up at Emma. "You said you worked with him before?" Emma nodded, never moving far from Ranger's side. "At Sentinel Security, I was part of their K9 training program until I was laid off in budget cuts last year. Ranger was one of my trainees." Lieutenant Reed, who had been taking notes, looked up sharply. "Sentinel told us this dog was reported deceased 3 months ago. Did you know that?" "That's what they told me too," Emma replied. "I was devastated. He was..." She hesitated. "Special, even among the trained dogs. His intelligence, his ability to read situations, it was extraordinary." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Special how exactly?" Emma exchanged a glance with Dr. Sanderson, who had paused in her examination of Ranger. "Sentinel's standard K9 training program is already intensive, but Ranger was part of their advanced program. They were developing enhanced training protocols for dogs assigned to high-security details. The rumors were that they were experimenting with new methods to expand canine cognitive capabilities." "You mean they were experimenting on the dogs?" Reed asked. "Not in the way you're thinking," Emma clarified. "It was specialized training, cognitive exercises, memory enhancement. Nothing that would harm them physically. At least that's what we were told." She looked down at Ranger's bandaged shoulder. "Clearly, something changed after I left." Dr. Sanderson finished her examination and repacked her medical bag. His wound is stable, though he'll need antibiotics and rest. More concerning is what he represents, evidence in what appears to be an attempted murder of a very valuable asset. Reed nodded grimly. Which means whoever tried to kill him the first time will likely try again. He turned to Emma. Ms. Chen, I need to place you and Ranger under protective custody until we determine what's going on here. Emma blinked in surprise. Protective custody? But I have clients, appointments, all of which can be rescheduled, Reed interrupted firmly. This dog found you for a reason, Ms. Chen. He trusted you enough to travel miles in his condition to reach you. That makes you either the best protection he has, or potentially a target yourself. As if understanding the gravity of the situation, Ranger pulled himself to a sitting position on the couch, his eyes moving between Emma and Reed. Despite his weakened state, his posture conveyed the alertness that emphasized his training. There's something else you should know, Emma said quietly, her hand resting on Ranger's head. Sentinel doesn't just provide standard security. Their top-tier K9 units, including Ranger, were assigned to corporate clients with sensitive operations. These dogs weren't just trained to detect intruders or explosives. They were trained to identify specific behaviors, to recognize patterns that might indicate corporate espionage or insider threats. Reed's expression darkened. You're saying this dog might have witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see? Emma nodded slowly. And whoever tried to kill him is probably counting on the fact that he can't tell anyone what he saw. But he found you, Reed observed. Yes, Emma replied, meeting Ranger's intelligent gaze. He found me. Emma's safe house turned out to be a cabin on the outskirts of Mapleton, nestled among pine trees with a view of the mountains. The property belonged to the police department, Lieutenant Reed explained, used occasionally to house witnesses in sensitive cases. A chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, and an officer would be stationed outside at all times. It's not the Ritz, Reed said as he unlocked the front door, but it's secure and off the grid. Emma followed him inside, Ranger limping slightly beside her. The cabin was small but clean, with basic furnishings, a living area with a worn sofa, a kitchenette with dated appliances, and a bedroom visible through a doorway at the back. The musty scent of disuse hung in the air. How long do you expect us to stay here? Emma asked, setting down the hastily packed bag containing her clothes and toiletries. Reed shrugged. Hard to say. A few days at minimum while we investigate. Could be longer. He handed her a prepaid cell phone. Use this if you need to contact me. It can't be traced. Emma pocketed the phone, trying to absorb the surreal turn her life had taken in the span of a few hours. This morning, her biggest concern had been being late for an appointment. Now she was in protective custody with a dog everyone believed was dead. We're sending officers to interview your former colleagues at Sentinel, Reed continued. In the meantime, I need you to write down everything you can remember about Ranger's training, the advanced program you mentioned, and any potential corporate clients who might have had access to him. Emma nodded, though her attention was on Ranger, who was methodically inspecting every corner of the cabin, his nose working overtime despite his injury. His behavior reminded her of his training protocols, securing a new environment, identifying potential threats or escape routes. Even wounded, his instincts remained sharp. Lieutenant, she said hesitantly, there's something I haven't told you about Ranger. Something I'm not sure you'd believe. Reed raised an eyebrow. Try me. Emma knelt beside Ranger, who had completed his inspection and returned to her side. The advanced program wasn't just about enhanced training. Ranger was part of a specialized group being developed for corporate intelligence gathering. They called it Project Sentinel. What exactly does that mean? Reed asked, his expression guarded. It means, Emma said, meeting Ranger's intelligent gaze, that he was trained to understand complex verbal commands, to recognize specific people and behaviors, and to communicate what he observed. Reed's skepticism was evident. Communicate how? Last I checked, dogs can't talk. Not in words, Emma agreed, but through a sophisticated system of indicated responses. Ranger can answer yes or no questions by touching specific objects with his paw. He can identify faces from photographs. He can even indicate numbers by tapping his paw a specific number of times. To demonstrate, Emma turned to Ranger. Ranger, how many people are in this room? Without hesitation, the German Shepherd tapped his paw against the floor 3 times. Show me where the exit is, Emma commanded. Ranger immediately walked to the front door and sat facing it. Now show me a different way out. The dog trotted to a window on the far side of the room and placed his paw against the glass. Reed watched with undisguised amazement. That's remarkable, but it doesn't explain why someone would want him dead. No, Emma agreed, but it might explain why he came to me. Ranger and I developed a special bond during training. I was the one who worked most closely with him on the communication protocols. Reed nodded slowly, processing this information. So if he witnessed something incriminating, he might be able to tell us what it was or who was involved. Exactly, Emma said, and whoever tried to kill him knows that too. After Reed left, Emma set about making the cabin more comfortable. She found clean linens in a closet and made up the bed, then prepared a makeshift bed for Ranger using spare blankets. The kitchen was stocked with basic, non-perishable food, and Reed had brought additional groceries, including high-quality dog food for Ranger. As evening fell, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor beside Ranger, gently checking his bandages. The wound was clean, showing no signs of infection, though it would clearly take time to heal completely. As she worked, she spoke softly to him. I still can't believe you're alive, Ranger. When they told me you died, her voice caught. I tried to find out what happened, but no one would give me a straight answer. And now here you are, and someone tried to kill you for real. She stroked his head, her fingers tracing the distinctive white patch on his chest. What did you see, boy? What got you into this mess? Ranger's eyes never left her face, and Emma had the distinct impression he understood every word. His training had developed his cognitive abilities far beyond those of a typical dog, creating a level of interspecies communication that still amazed her. We need to figure out what happened, she continued. Lieutenant Reed seems competent, but we can help him. You can help him, if you're willing to trust him. Ranger tilted his head, his ears perked forward attentively. I know you're tired and hurt, Emma said. We'll start tomorrow, okay? For now, just rest. As if understanding, Ranger laid his head on his paws, though his eyes remained alert, watchful. Emma couldn't help but wonder what was going through his highly trained mind. What memories haunted him. What dangers he perceived that she couldn't. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. Through the cabin windows, Emma could see the silhouette of Officer Patel patrolling the perimeter, a reassuring presence given the circumstances. Still, she double-checked the locks on all doors and windows before finally allowing herself to rest. At Sentinel Security Headquarters, Nathan Drake was not having a good evening. The police had arrived with questions about Ranger, questions he wasn't authorized to answer. He'd deflected as best he could, providing the official report about the dog's supposed death during a training exercise, but he could tell they weren't buying it. Now, alone in his office, he reviewed the police report about the German Shepherd found buried alive. There was no mention of where the dog had gone after escaping from the vet clinic, but Nathan had his suspicions. There was only one person Ranger would seek out if he were injured and afraid: the trainer who had formed an unusually strong bond with him. Nathan pulled up Emma Chen's personnel file. Her termination had been regrettable but necessary when Project Sentinel shifted from training to operational status. She had been too attached to the dogs, too questioning of certain protocols, too ethical for what the project had eventually become. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Sir, the police were here asking about R7. Yes, I told them the official story, but they clearly have information suggesting otherwise. No, they didn't say where the dog is now, but I have a theory. Emma Chen, his former trainer. I'll handle it personally." At Holt Pharmaceuticals, Elijah Holt sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling far below his penthouse view. His daughter Sophia had gone home hours ago, but sleep eluded him. The morning's board meeting had gone smoothly enough, the Novatech merger proceeding as planned, but the unresolved situation with Ranger gnawed at him. His phone rang, displaying a number he recognized but had never saved in his contacts, a necessary precaution. "Tell me you have good news," he answered. The voice on the other end was cool, professional. "The asset has been located. We believe he's with his former trainer, Emma Chen." Elijah's grip tightened on the phone. "And? We're handling it. By tomorrow, this will all be resolved." "It had better be," Elijah replied. "The merger goes public in 3 days. I want this situation contained before then." "Understood, sir." After ending the call, Elijah moved to his private bar and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, contemplating how a single dog had become such a threat to everything he'd built. It wasn't supposed to be this complicated. When Sentinel had first approached Holt Pharmaceuticals about providing enhanced security for their research facilities, the idea of dogs specially trained to detect corporate espionage had seemed innovative, even elegant. What they hadn't mentioned was how much those dogs would actually perceive or remember. Ranger had been present during 3 critical meetings where the truth about Novatech's miracle drug had been discussed openly. The drug that was the centerpiece of the merger, the breakthrough medication that would revolutionize treatments for Alzheimer's disease, the drug that, according to suppressed test results, had fatal side effects in 28% of patients. Dawn broke over the safe house, golden light filtering through the pines. Emma awoke to find Ranger already alert, sitting by the bedroom door. When he saw she was awake, he padded over to the bed, his tail wagging slightly. "Morning, boy," she murmured, reaching out to stroke his head. "How's that shoulder feeling today?" Ranger leaned into her touch, his brown eyes meeting hers with that uncanny intelligence that had always set him apart. Outside, Emma could hear Officer Patel being relieved by the day shift, the murmur of voices as they exchanged information. As she prepared breakfast, oatmeal for herself, a carefully measured portion of dog food mixed with an antibiotic pill for Ranger, Emma's mind worked through everything she knew, searching for connections. Why would someone want Ranger dead? What could he possibly have witnessed that would make him a target? She watched as Ranger ate his breakfast with military precision, and an idea began to form. If he could tell her who had tried to kill him, perhaps they could start unraveling this mystery from the inside out. Emma cleared the kitchen table and laid out a series of objects, a tennis ball, a rope toy, and a rubber bone. These were standard training tools she had used with Ranger during his communication sessions at Sentinel. Lieutenant Reed had arranged for her essential equipment to be delivered to the safe house, recognizing that Ranger's unique abilities might be key to unraveling the mystery. "Okay, Ranger," she said, her voice taking on the clear, steady cadence she'd used during their training sessions. "We're going to work through this together." Ranger sat at attention, his ears pricked forward, eyes focused on her with laser-like intensity. Despite his injury, his posture was alert, professional, a stark reminder of his exceptional training. Emma placed 3 photographs on the table, one of Nathan Drake that she'd found online, one of a generic security guard, and one of a woman Emma didn't recognize but who had a similar build and coloring to herself, a control image. "Ranger, I want you to look at these photos," she instructed. "Did any of these people hurt you?" Ranger studied the images, his eyes moving methodically from one to the next. After a moment, he placed his paw deliberately on Nathan Drake's photograph. Emma's heart raced. Nathan was involved in this? It made a terrible kind of sense. As director of operations, Drake had direct access to all the security dogs, including the specialized units like Ranger. "Was he the one who shot you?" she asked, her voice tight with anger. Ranger hesitated, then moved his paw to the rubber bone, their established signal for no. "But he was involved," Emma pressed. "Did he order it?" Paw to the tennis ball. "Yes." "Was it related to your work? Something you witnessed during an assignment?" Another tap on the tennis ball. Emma sat back, processing this information. Ranger had been assigned to various corporate clients during his time at Sentinel, providing enhanced security for sensitive operations. If he had witnessed something incriminating. "Ranger, I'm going to show you some more photos," she said, pulling out her laptop. "These are the corporate clients you might have worked with. I want you to tell me if any of them were involved in what happened to you." She pulled up the websites for Sentinel's known corporate clients, one by one, showing Ranger their logos and executive team photos. Most earned no reaction, but when she reached Holt Pharmaceuticals, Ranger's demeanor changed instantly. His ears flattened and a low growl rumbled in his throat. "Holt Pharmaceuticals," Emma murmured, studying the corporate leadership team displayed on the screen. "Did someone from this company hurt you?" Ranger placed his paw on the tennis ball. "Who?" She pointed to each executive photo in turn. Ranger remained still until her finger reached Elijah Holt, the CEO. The German Shepherd's paw came down firmly on the tennis ball again. "Elijah Holt," Emma whispered, staring at the distinguished-looking man with silver hair. "What did you witness, Ranger? What could be so important that the CEO of a pharmaceutical giant would want you dead?" Ranger couldn't answer such complex questions directly, but his reaction told Emma they were on the right track. She made notes of everything they'd established so far, planning to share it with Lieutenant Reed when he arrived later. As she worked, Emma couldn't help but marvel at Ranger's cognitive abilities. The communication system they'd developed at Sentinel had started as a basic yes-no framework, but Ranger had quickly surpassed expectations, demonstrating an understanding of concepts most people wouldn't believe possible in a dog. His memory was extraordinary, his reasoning capabilities almost human-like in some respects. "You're quite something, aren't you?" she said softly, scratching behind his ears. Ranger leaned into her touch, his vigilant demeanor softening momentarily. Then, abruptly, his head snapped toward the window, ears erect and body tense. Emma froze. "What is it, boy?" Ranger moved silently to the window, keeping his body low. Emma followed, carefully staying out of sight as she peered through the curtains. The officer who was supposed to be guarding the perimeter was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a dark SUV was parked at the edge of the property, half hidden among the trees. Two men in tactical gear were approaching the cabin, moving with the practiced efficiency of professional operators. "Oh God," Emma whispered, backing away from the window. She grabbed her phone and dialed Lieutenant Reed's number with shaking fingers. "Reed," he answered on the second ring. "They found us," Emma said, keeping her voice low. "Two men in tactical gear approaching the cabin. The officer on duty is missing." Reed cursed. "Stay inside, away from windows. I'm sending backup now. ETA 15 minutes. "We might not have 15 minutes, Emma replied, watching as the men split up, one moving toward the front door, the other circling around to the back. "Is there a weapon in the cabin?" she asked urgently. "Look under the sink in the bathroom," Reed instructed. There's a lockbox. Code is 5293. Emma hurried to the bathroom, Ranger at her heels. She found the lockbox and entered the code with trembling fingers. Inside was a 9mm handgun. Emma had basic firearms training, a requirement for all Sentinel employees, but she'd never had to use a gun in a real situation. "I've got it," she told Reed, checking that the weapon was loaded. "But I've never—" "Just stay hidden," Reed interrupted. "Use it only if you have no choice. Help is coming." The call ended, and Emma looked at Ranger, whose body was coiled with tension, ready for action despite his injury. "We need to hide," she whispered. Ranger had other ideas. He moved purposefully to the bedroom, then looked back at Emma, clearly indicating she should follow. In the bedroom, he went directly to the closet and pawed at the back wall. Emma frowned in confusion, then understood. She ran her hands along the wall and felt a slight depression. Pressing it revealed a hidden door, a panic room built into the safe house. "Smart boy," she breathed, pushing the door open. The space beyond was small but secure, with reinforced walls and another locked box that likely contained emergency supplies. Before they could enter, the sound of breaking glass came from the living room. The intruders were inside. Emma raised the gun, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give away their position. Ranger stood beside her, his body tense but controlled, waiting for her command. "Check the bedroom," a male voice instructed from the living room. Footsteps approached. Emma backed into the panic room, gesturing for Ranger to follow, but the German Shepherd remained in place, his gaze fixed on the bedroom doorway. "Ranger, come," Emma whispered urgently. Instead, Ranger moved silently to position himself behind the door, an ambush strategy she recognized from his tactical training. The bedroom door swung open. A man in black tactical gear entered, gun raised. He swept the room with professional precision, but before he could check the closet, Ranger launched himself at the intruder, a blur of fur and focused aggression. The man went down hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. Ranger's jaws clamped around his wrist, not breaking skin, but immobilizing him with painful pressure. "What the?" the man gasped, trying to shake free. The second intruder rushed in, alerted by the commotion. He raised his weapon toward Ranger. "No!" Emma shouted, emerging from the closet with the gun pointed at the second man. "Drop it or I'll shoot." The standoff lasted only seconds, but to Emma, it felt like hours. Her aim wavering slightly with fear, the intruder's eyes calculating behind his tactical mask, Ranger maintaining his hold on the first man with unwavering determination. The distant wail of sirens broke the tension. Backup was arriving sooner than expected. "This isn't over," the standing intruder said coldly. He grabbed his partner's collar and pulled him up. Ranger released his grip only when Emma signaled him to do so, allowing the men to retreat. They fled through the front door just as police vehicles screeched to a halt outside. Officer Patel emerged from the lead car, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. "They ambushed me during patrol," she explained as officers secured the perimeter. "Hit me from behind. I managed to radio for help before I blacked out." Lieutenant Reed arrived minutes later, his expression grim as he surveyed the broken window and signs of struggle. "You okay?" he asked Emma, noticing how she still clutched the gun with white knuckles. She nodded, finally lowering the weapon. "Thanks to Ranger. He took down one of them before they could find us." Reed knelt to examine the German Shepherd, who showed no signs of distress, despite having reopened his shoulder wound during the confrontation. Fresh blood stained his bandages, but his posture remained vigilant, professional. "That's one hell of a dog," Reed remarked, a new respect in his voice. "He's more than that," Emma replied, "and I think I know why someone wants him dead." She retrieved her notes from the kitchen. "Ranger has identified Nathan Drake from Sentinel Security and Elijah Holt from Holt Pharmaceuticals as being involved in the attempt on his life." Reed's eyebrows shot up. "Elijah Holt, the pharmaceutical CEO?" "Yes," Emma confirmed, and I think it has something to do with what Ranger witnessed while providing security for Holt Pharmaceuticals. Reed studied her notes, his expression thoughtful. This gives us a direction at least, but it also confirms you're not safe here anymore. We need to move you and Ranger to a more secure location. The new safe house was a nondescript apartment in a high-security building owned by the Mapleton Police Department. Located on the 15th floor, it offered a defensible position with controlled access points and round-the-clock police presence. As Emma settled in, Ranger methodically inspected every room, his movements deliberate despite the fresh bandages Dr. Sanderson had applied to his reopened wound. "He never stops working, does he?" Lieutenant Reed observed, watching the German Shepherd's systematic sweep of the apartment. "It's what he was trained to do," Emma replied. "Assess, secure, protect. It's so deeply ingrained that even injury doesn't override it." Reed nodded, then spread a series of documents across the dining table. "I pulled everything we have on Holt Pharmaceuticals. Their public profile is spotless. Cutting-edge research, philanthropic initiatives, stellar corporate citizenship. Their stock has been climbing steadily for the past year, largely due to a breakthrough Alzheimer's drug they're developing with a company called Novatech." "The merger," Emma said, remembering fragments of business news she'd heard recently. "It's been all over the financial channels." "Exactly. Holt Pharmaceuticals is acquiring Novatech for their revolutionary drug, NV-237. The merger goes public in 3 days, and when it does, Elijah Holt stands to become one of the wealthiest men in the country." Reed tapped a financial report. "We're talking billions." Emma glanced at Ranger, who had completed his inspection and now sat attentively beside her. "So what could Ranger have witnessed that would threaten a multi-billion-dollar merger?" "That's what we need to figure out," Reed replied. "I've requested a warrant to access Sentinel's records of Ranger's assignments, but they're fighting it, claiming corporate security privilege. In the meantime, I've assigned detectives to dig into Novatech and the development of NV-237. Emma absently stroked Ranger's head, her mind working through the implications. If Elijah Holt is willing to kill a dog to protect this merger, the stakes must be enormous. "People have killed for a lot less," Reed pointed out grimly. "But yes, my gut says we're looking at something major. Fraud, data manipulation, something that could tank the entire deal if it came to light." Ranger shifted, drawing their attention. His alert posture and focused gaze reminded Emma of his training sessions when he wanted to communicate something important. "I think he wants to tell us more," she said, moving to the couch and patting the cushion beside her. Ranger jumped up, careful of his injured shoulder, and sat facing her. "Lieutenant, can you get me a notebook and pen, and maybe your phone or a tablet with internet access?" Reed complied, curious to see what would happen next. Emma arranged the notebook and tablet on the coffee table, then took a deep breath, centering herself as she had during Ranger's training sessions. "Ranger," she began, her voice taking on that clear, instructional quality. "I need you to help us understand what you saw. Something at Holt Pharmaceuticals that made someone want to hurt you." The German Shepherd's eyes never left her face, his entire being focused on her words. "Was it about the merger with Novatech?" Emma asked. Ranger tapped his paw once on the notebook. "Yes." "Was it about their drug, NV-237? Another tap. "Yes." Emma exchanged a glance with Reed, who watched with undisguised fascination. "Is there something wrong with the drug, something dangerous?" "Yes." Reed leaned forward. "Is it evidence that could stop the merger?" "Yes." Emma's mind raced. "Ranger, I'm going to show you some words on the tablet. Tap if any of them relate to what you saw." She pulled up a simple note-taking app and typed several words related to pharmaceutical development. Testing, results, side effects, data, patients, deaths. Ranger studied the screen, then tapped definitively on side effects, data, and deaths. Jesus, Reed muttered. Emma continued, her heart pounding. Are they hiding negative test results? Data about side effects that cause deaths? Yes. And you saw this during a meeting you were securing? You witnessed them discussing this? Yes. Reed stood up and began pacing. If Holt Pharmaceuticals is suppressing data about fatal side effects of their miracle drug, that's not just corporate fraud, it's potential mass homicide. Once NV-237 hits the market, thousands could die, Emma finished, feeling sick, and Ranger was the silent witness they never considered. Reed nodded grimly, until something made them realize he understood exactly what he'd heard. Ranger shifted his position, wincing slightly as his movement pulled at his injury. Emma immediately noticed his discomfort. He needs rest, she said. The communication sessions are mentally taxing for him, especially in his condition. Reed checked his watch. I need to get back to the station anyway. Start pulling these threads. Based on what Rangers told us, I can expedite the warrant for Sentinel's records. He moved toward the door, then paused. Ms. Chen, what you've developed with this dog, it's remarkable, and it might just save a lot of lives. After Reed left, Emma prepared a simple dinner for herself and a carefully measured meal for Ranger, who ate with his usual methodical precision. As night fell over the city, she found herself standing at the window, watching the lights below, wondering how many people out there might be affected by what they'd uncovered today. Ranger padded silently to her side, pressing gently against her leg in a rare display of affection. We're in quite a situation, aren't we, boy? She murmured, stroking his head. Powerful people want you silenced, and now they probably want me gone too. The German Shepherd looked up at her, his brown eyes conveying a steadiness that Emma found surprisingly reassuring. Despite everything he'd been through, being shot, buried alive, forced to flee for his life, Ranger remained unshakable, determined. His loyalty to her, his trust in her ability to protect him, filled her with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. We're going to see this through, she promised him. Whatever happens. That night, as Emma tried to sleep in the unfamiliar apartment, Ranger refused to rest in the dog bed provided for him. Instead, he positioned himself vigilantly by the bedroom door, his ears continuously swiveling to track sounds from outside. Even in sleep, he remained partially alert, a living security system born of exceptional training and instinct. Across town, Lieutenant Reed sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of documents and a whiteboard filled with names, dates, and connections. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Ranger had been assigned to provide security for 3 critical meetings at Holt Pharmaceuticals in the weeks before his supposed death. All 3 meetings had included discussions about the Novatech merger and NV-237. Reed's phone rang, displaying the number of Detective Morales, who'd been assigned to dig into Novatech's history. Tell me you found something, Reed answered. More than something, Morales replied, his voice tight with controlled excitement. I managed to track down a former Novatech researcher who left the company 6 months ago, Dr. Abigail Wright. She wouldn't talk on the phone, but she agreed to meet you tomorrow morning. Did she give any indication what it's about? Not specifically, but she said, and I quote, if Elijah Holt is moving forward with NV-237, people need to know the truth. I got the impression she's been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Reed jotted down the meeting details. Good work. Keep digging into those clinical trials. I want to know if any data mysteriously disappeared. After hanging up, Reed leaned back in his chair, studying the photo of Elijah Holt pinned to his board. The distinguished CEO looked every inch the successful businessman and philanthropist. Silver hair, perfectly styled, tailored suit, confident smile. The type of man people instinctively trusted with their health, their investments, their lives. And potentially, Reed thought grimly, the type of man who would bury a dog alive to protect his fortune. At Sentinel Security Headquarters, Nathan Drake worked late into the night, methodically erasing evidence of Project Sentinel's most controversial aspects. The failed attempt to eliminate Emma Chen and recover Ranger had accelerated his timeline. It was only a matter of time before the police obtained a warrant for Sentinel's records, and Drake needed to ensure that nothing remained that could implicate him or his powerful client. As he deleted files and shredded documents, Drake reflected on how quickly the situation had spiraled out of control. It had seemed so simple when Elijah Holt first approached him about eliminating the security risk Ranger posed, a regrettable but necessary business decision. The dog had simply been too observant, too present during confidential discussions that should never have been overheard. Who could have predicted that the animal would survive being shot and buried, or that he would find his way back to the one person who could understand what he knew? Dawn broke over Mapleton, painting the city skyline in shades of gold and rose. Emma awoke to find Ranger already alert, his posture tense as he stared at the apartment door. A moment later, she heard what had caught his attention, the soft murmur of voices in the hallway, the jingle of keys. "It's all right," she reassured him, recognizing Lieutenant Reed's voice among others. "It's the lieutenant." Ranger relaxed marginally, but remained watchful as Emma pulled on a robe and moved to open the door. Reed stood outside with two officers and a petite woman with short gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, her expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. "Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Abigail Wright," Reed introduced as they entered. "She was a lead researcher at Novatech until 6 months ago." Emma extended her hand, which Dr. Wright shook firmly. "Thank you for coming, Doctor." "Call me Abby," the woman replied, her gaze already shifting to Ranger, who studied her with intelligent eyes. "Is this him? The dog who survived?" Emma nodded. "This is Ranger." Abby approached slowly, respecting the German Shepherd's space. "Remarkable," she murmured. "When Lieutenant Reed told me about his cognitive abilities, I was skeptical. But looking at him now..." She knelt to Ranger's level. "You've been through quite an ordeal, haven't you?" Ranger held her gaze, his head tilted slightly as if assessing her trustworthiness. "He won't harm you," Emma assured her. "He's exceptionally well trained." "I'm not afraid," Abby replied with a small smile. "I've spent my career observing subtle behavioral cues in test subjects. Your Ranger here is evaluating me, trying to determine if I'm friend or foe. It's a remarkably human cognitive process." Reed gestured toward the dining table, where he began setting up a recording device. "Dr. Wright has agreed to provide a formal statement about her experiences at Novatech, specifically relating to the development of NV-237. Once they were settled, Reed activated the recorder, stating the date, time, and those present. "Dr. Wright, please tell us about your role at Novatech and your involvement with NV-237. Abby straightened in her chair, her demeanor shifting from hesitant to resolute. "I joined Novatech 5 years ago as Director of Neurological Research. My team was responsible for developing treatments for degenerative brain disorders, with a primary focus on Alzheimer's disease. 2 years into my tenure, we achieved what appeared to be a breakthrough with compound NV-237. She paused, removing her glasses to clean them, a nervous gesture that belied her professional tone. Initial tests were promising. NV-237 showed remarkable efficacy in halting the progression of cognitive decline in our early animal trials. The company fast-tracked it for human testing, and that's when the problems began." "What kind of problems?" Reed prompted. "The first human trial involved 120 patients with early to moderate Alzheimer's. The results were unprecedented. 82% showed significant improvement in cognitive function within 8 weeks. Abby's voice took on a bitter edge. The company was ecstatic. Investors were lining up. But then patients began experiencing side effects. What kind of side effects? Emma asked. Initially, they seemed manageable. Headaches, dizziness, elevated blood pressure. But as treatment continued, 27 patients developed severe neurological complications. 9 died of massive cerebral hemorrhages. Reed leaned forward. And how did Novatech respond? They buried the data, Abby replied flatly. Classified the deaths as unrelated to treatment. Patients with complications were quietly removed from the study. The official report showed only the positive outcomes, with minor side effects listed as rare and manageable. Did you object? Emma asked. Strenuously, Abby confirmed. I demanded a complete halt to human trials until we understood what was happening. But by then, Elijah Holt had entered the picture. Holt Pharmaceuticals was looking for exactly this kind of breakthrough drug to bolster their neuroscience portfolio. The potential profits were astronomical. So they ignored your concerns, Reed stated. Worse than ignored. I was removed from the project, reassigned to an unrelated research area. When I threatened to go public, I was reminded of my non-disclosure agreement and the ruinous legal consequences of breaking it. Abby's voice wavered. A week later, my home was broken into. Nothing was taken, but my research notes were clearly rifled through. The message was clear. So you resigned, Emma concluded. I had no choice, but I've been watching from the sidelines, waiting. When I saw the merger announcement, I knew they were moving forward with NV-237 despite the risks. Abby looked directly at Reed. Once this drug hits the market, thousands could die. Throughout Abby's testimony, Ranger had remained attentive, his ears moving subtly as he processed the conversation. Now he stood and approached the table, looking pointedly at Emma. I think he wants to communicate, she explained, retrieving the notebook and tablet they'd used previously. With Abby watching in fascination, Emma set up their communication system. Ranger, did you witness meetings where this information was discussed? The problems with NV-237? Ranger tapped the notebook once. Yes. Were both Novatech and Holt Pharmaceuticals executives present? Yes. Was Elijah Holt himself there? Yes. Abby gasped softly. The dog was in the room during these discussions? Emma nodded. Sentinel provides enhanced security for high-level corporate meetings. Ranger was likely positioned in the room, assumed to be just a highly trained guard dog, but he's much more than that. This is extraordinary, Abby murmured. A canine witness to corporate fraud. Reed's expression remained skeptical. It's compelling, but we need concrete evidence. No court is going to accept the testimony of a dog, no matter how intelligent. But his testimony can guide our investigation, Emma argued. Tell us where to look. Reed conceded the point with a nod. Dr. Wright, do you have any documentation that supports your claims? Anything that survived your departure from Novatech? Abby hesitated. I wasn't supposed to, but yes. I kept copies of the original trial data, encrypted and hidden. It wasn't enough to go public on my own. Corporate lawyers would have destroyed me. But with a police investigation backing me up, this could be the evidence we need, Reed said, his excitement barely contained. With your testimony and the original data, we might be able to stop the merger before NV-237 reaches the market. We'll need more than that, Abby cautioned. Elijah Holt has political connections, friends in regulatory agencies. He's been preparing for this for years. Then we'll need to be creative, Reed replied, his gaze shifting to Ranger. And maybe our four-legged friend here can help us one more time. As they discussed strategy, Emma noticed Ranger's attention drift toward the window. The German Shepherd's posture stiffened, his ears alert. Following his gaze, Emma saw nothing unusual in the cityscape outside, but she had learned to trust Ranger's instincts. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, interrupting the conversation, "I think we might have surveillance." Reed moved swiftly to the window, staying to the side to avoid being seen. After a careful scan, he spotted what had alarmed Ranger, a man in a parked car across the street equipped with what appeared to be a long-range camera or listening device aimed at their window. "How the hell did they find this location?" Reed muttered, immediately on his phone calling for backup. "They're getting desperate," Abby observed, her face pale. "The merger is in 2 days. They can't afford any disruptions now." Within minutes, officers were dispatched to apprehend the observer, but by the time they reached the vehicle, it was empty. The surveillance equipment remained, however, a sophisticated directional microphone capable of picking up conversations through windows from a considerable distance. "They've been listening to us," Reed realized grimly. "They know about Dr. Wright, about the evidence she has." Emma felt a chill run through her. "Which means we're all in danger now." Reed nodded, already making calls to arrange additional security. "We need to move quickly. Dr. Wright, I'm placing you under protective custody. We'll retrieve your evidence immediately." As the apartment transformed into a hive of activity, with officers securing the premises and preparing for relocation, Emma found herself beside Ranger, who maintained his vigilant watch despite the commotion. "You knew," she said softly, stroking his head. "You sensed them watching us." Ranger leaned slightly against her leg, a rare gesture of affection from the professionally trained dog. In that moment, Emma felt a fierce determination rise within her. This remarkable animal had survived being shot and buried alive to bring this truth to light. She would not let his courage be in vain. "We're going to finish this," she promised him. "Together." Across town, Elijah Holt slammed his office door shut, his normally composed demeanor shattered by rage. The call he'd just received confirmed his worst fears. Dr. Abigail Wright had surfaced, and she was cooperating with the police. "How could you let this happen?" he demanded of the man sitting calmly across from his desk, Nathan Drake, still immaculate in his designer suit despite the chaos unfolding around them. "The situation is unfortunate but not unsalvageable," Drake replied, his voice level. "We know where they are, we know what they know, and the merger is still proceeding on schedule." "For now," Holt snapped. "But if Wright provides her evidence, if the police manage to build a case, they won't," Drake interrupted with cold certainty. "I've deployed our best assets to handle the situation. By this time tomorrow, your problems will be eliminated." Holt studied the security director's face, searching for any sign of doubt and finding none. "All of them? The dog, the trainer, Wright, the lieutenant?" Drake nodded once. "All of them. The operation is already in motion." After Drake left, Holt moved to the window, gazing out at the city that had been his domain for decades. He had not built his empire by being squeamish about necessary sacrifices. NV-237 would revolutionize Alzheimer's treatment for the majority of patients who responded well to it. The unfortunate few who experienced fatal side effects were a statistical footnote compared to the millions who would benefit and the billions in profit that would flow to Holt Pharmaceuticals. A necessary cost of progress, he told himself. Nothing more. Night had fallen by the time they reached the new safe house, a modernized industrial loft in the converted warehouse district of Mapleton, owned by a retired police captain who had offered it as a secure location. With its reinforced doors, limited access points, and private underground parking, it provided both security and anonymity. Lieutenant Reed personally oversaw the transfer, using a convoy of unmarked vehicles and multiple decoy routes to ensure they weren't followed. Dr. Wright had been escorted separately to retrieve her hidden evidence before joining them at the loft. Now the four of them, Reed, Emma, Abby, and Ranger, gathered around a steel dining table, reviewing their strategy, while 2 officers stood guard outside. "The encrypted drive contains everything," Abby explained, connecting a small device to Reed's laptop. "Complete patient data from the original trials, internal emails discussing the cover-up, financial projections based on manipulated results. It's all here." Reed nodded, his expression grim as the files populated the screen. "This is damning but legally complicated. We'll need to get this to the DA immediately. Push for an emergency injunction to halt the merger." "Will that be enough?" Emma asked, absently stroking Ranger's head as he sat vigilantly beside her chair. "Even with an injunction, the evidence will take time to process. The merger is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." "We need to go public," Abby insisted. "Get this information to the media. Create enough public pressure that Holt can't simply bulldoze through with his political connections." Reed frowned. "Going public has risks. It could compromise our legal case, give Holt's team time to prepare countermeasures." "People could die," Abby interrupted, her voice rising. "If NV-237 reaches the market, real patients will take this drug. We don't have the luxury of waiting for the legal system to catch up." As the discussion intensified, Ranger suddenly stiffened, his ears swiveling toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his throat, not aggressive, but alerting. Emma immediately recognized the warning. "Someone's coming." Reed's hand moved to his weapon as he signaled the others to silence. Through the loft's security system, they could see a woman approaching the main entrance. Tall, professionally dressed, with a purposeful stride that suggested authority. "That's Sophia Holt," Abby whispered in shock. "Elijah's daughter. She's COO of Holt Pharmaceuticals." Reed drew his weapon. "How the hell did she find this place?" Before anyone could answer, the building's intercom buzzed. After a tense moment, Reed moved to answer it, keeping his voice neutral. "Yes?" "Lieutenant Reed," came a crisp female voice. "This is Sophia Holt. I need to speak with you about NV-237. I'm alone and unarmed." Reed exchanged glances with Emma and Abby. "Could be a trap," he murmured. "Or an opportunity," Abby countered. "Sophia was always more conscientious than her father. If she's here..." Reed made a decision. "Ms. Holt, I'll need you to submit to a search before entering, for security reasons." "I understand," came the immediate reply. After confirming she was indeed alone and unarmed, Reed allowed Sophia Holt to enter the loft. She was younger than Emma had expected, perhaps mid-30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that took in every detail of the space and its occupants. When her gaze landed on Ranger, something like recognition flickered across her features. "So it's true," she said softly. "The security dog survived." Ranger watched her intently, his posture alert, but not aggressive, assessing rather than threatening. "How did you find us?" Reed demanded, still suspicious despite the search. "I've been monitoring my father's communications," Sophia replied bluntly. "When I realized he'd dispatched a team to eliminate all of you, I knew I needed to act quickly." "A team?" Emma repeated, alarm spreading through her. "What team?" "Former military contractors now working for Sentinel. They specialize in making problems disappear." Sophia's clinical description sent a chill through the room. "They're very good at what they do, and they're already on their way. We have perhaps an hour before they arrive." Reed immediately moved to alert his officers outside, but Sophia raised a hand to stop him. "Don't bother. The men stationed at the entrance have already been neutralized, non-lethally but effectively. That's how I was able to approach without challenge." "Jesus," Reed muttered, immediately on his radio requesting backup. "Why are you telling us this?" Abby asked, studying Sophia with a mixture of suspicion and hope. "Why betray your father's operation?" Sophia's composed exterior cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of deep distress. Because I only recently discovered the truth about NV-237. My father kept me focused on the business aspects of the merger, away from the clinical data. When I finally saw the actual trial results, she shook her head. I can't be part of this. People will die. So you're here to help us stop the merger? Emma clarified. I'm here to make sure the truth comes out, Sophia corrected. What happens to Holt Pharmaceuticals to my father? That will be for the courts to decide. Ranger had moved closer to Sophia during this exchange, studying her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. Emma recognized his assessment behavior, the slight tilt of his head, the focused attention that missed nothing. Ranger, she said quietly, is she telling the truth? Can we trust her? The German Shepherd looked at Emma, then deliberately placed his paw on the floor once. Yes. Sophia's eyes widened. He actually understood that question and answered it, Emma confirmed. Ranger's cognitive abilities go far beyond typical canine training. That's why he was dangerous to your father. He understood the conversations about NV-237 he witnessed while providing security. Understanding dawned on Sophia's face. That's why my father ordered him eliminated, a dog who could comprehend corporate fraud and identify those responsible, Reed added. Urgency returned to Sophia's expression. We need to move quickly. The team coming for you is highly trained and utterly ruthless. They have one objective: ensure the merger proceeds without interference. Reed was already packing up the evidence, securing Abby's drive in an evidence bag. My backup won't arrive for at least 20 minutes. We need to relocate now. Where? Emma asked, gathering Ranger's medical supplies. The German Shepherd remained close to her side, his alertness communicating the danger more effectively than words. I have a place, Sophia offered. A cabin outside the city. It's not in my name, and my father doesn't know about it. Reed hesitated, clearly weighing the risk of trusting her against their dwindling options. Ms. Holt, if this is some kind of— It's not, she interrupted firmly. I understand your suspicion, Lieutenant, but right now I'm your best chance of keeping that evidence, and all of you, safe until your backup arrives. She glanced at Ranger. He trusts me. Shouldn't that count for something? Before Reed could respond, the loft's security system emitted 3 sharp beeps, a perimeter breach alert. On the monitors, they could see dark figures moving swiftly through the building's lower level. They're here already, Sophia said, her voice tight. We're out of time. Reed made his decision. Everyone to the garage, now. They moved swiftly, Reed leading with his weapon drawn, Emma helping Abby gather the essential evidence while Ranger stayed vigilantly at their side. Sophia guided them toward a service elevator at the rear of the loft, a freight lift that bypassed the main floors and led directly to the underground parking. My car is the blue sedan in the corner, Sophia instructed as the elevator descended. It has enhanced security features. The garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet when they emerged from the elevator. Reed scanned the area, his trained eye seeking any sign of threat as they moved swiftly toward Sophia's vehicle. They were halfway there when Ranger froze, a low growl vibrating through his chest. A second later, the lights went out, plunging the garage into complete darkness. They've cut the power, Reed hissed. Everyone down. The first shots came from the far corner of the garage, suppressed weapons making muffled popping sounds as bullets pinged off concrete pillars near them. Reed returned fire, providing cover as they scrambled behind parked vehicles. Keep moving toward my car, Sophia urged, leading Abby by the arm through the darkness. Emma felt Ranger press against her leg, guiding her with gentle pressure, his night vision and hearing far superior to human capabilities in the pitch-black garage. She placed her hand on his back, trusting him to lead her safely as more shots echoed around them. They're trying to flank us, Reed warned, his voice a harsh whisper as he reloaded. "We need to reach that car now." A sudden cry of pain came from ahead. Abby had stumbled in the darkness, falling hard onto the concrete. Emma heard the distinct clatter of the evidence drive skittering across the floor. "The drive!" Abby gasped. "I dropped it." Without hesitation, Ranger darted forward into the darkness, following the sound. Emma's heart seized with fear as he disappeared from her side, heading directly into the area where the shots had originated. "Ranger!" she called, fighting the urge to follow him into the darkness. Reed grabbed her arm. "Stay down. We can't lose both of you." Seconds stretched into an eternity as they waited, pressed against the cold concrete floor. Then, emerging from the shadows like a ghost, Ranger returned, the small drive clutched carefully in his jaws. "Good boy," Emma whispered as he dropped it into her hand, relief flooding through her. "Let's go." The blue sedan tore through the night, headlights cutting through a light fog that had settled over the outskirts of Mapleton. Sophia drove with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations, taking back roads and unmarked Forest Service routes to avoid potential pursuit. In the passenger seat, Lieutenant Reed maintained radio contact with his department, coordinating the response to the attack. Emma and Abby occupied the back seat, with Ranger wedged between them, his alert gaze fixed on the road behind them. 3 officers down, all with non-lethal injuries, Reed reported grimly, ending his call. The tactical team arrived just after we escaped, but the assailants were already gone. They're sweeping the area now. "They won't find anything," Sophia said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "These aren't common criminals. They're ghost operatives trained to leave no trace." Emma gently examined Ranger's shoulder in the dim light of the car. The bandage had held during their escape, but she could tell the exertion had taken its toll on him. Despite this, the German Shepherd remained vigilant, his training overriding his physical discomfort. "How much further to your cabin?" she asked Sophia. "About 20 minutes. It's isolated, surrounded by forest on 3 sides and a lake on the 4th. One access road, easily defensible." Sophia glanced in the rearview mirror. "Your dog needs rest. That wound could reopen with any further stress." "He's more than just my dog," Emma replied, stroking Ranger's head. "He's the reason we're all here, the reason this truth might actually come to light." Abby clutched the evidence drive in her hands, her face pale in the dashboard lights. "Even with this evidence, Elijah Holt has resources we can't imagine. The merger announcement is scheduled for noon tomorrow. That gives us less than 12 hours to stop it." "We will stop it," Reed asserted, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. "As soon as we're secure at the cabin, I'll contact the district attorney directly. With what we have, we can request an emergency injunction." "And if that fails?" Emma asked. It was Sophia who answered, her voice cool and determined. "Then we go to the press. All of them, simultaneously. My father can control many things, but he can't contain a full-spectrum media explosion." They fell into tense silence as the car wound deeper into the forested hills outside Mapleton. Finally, Sophia turned onto a nearly invisible dirt track, cutting the headlights and navigating by moonlight. The cabin emerged from the darkness, a modern structure of glass and cedar, far more sophisticated than Emma had expected. "Stay in the car until I've secured the perimeter," Reed instructed, drawing his weapon as Sophia brought the vehicle to a stop. Ranger, however, had other ideas. Before anyone could stop him, he slipped through the narrow opening as Emma exited the car, moving swiftly to circle the cabin in a practiced search pattern. "He's checking for threats," Emma explained, watching his methodical movements with admiration. "It's what he's trained to do." After several tense minutes, Ranger returned to Emma's side, his demeanor relaxed, the all-clear signal she recognized from his training. Reed completed his own inspection of the cabin's interior before waving them inside, The interior was minimalist but comfortable, an open floor plan with a central living area, modern kitchen, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while the opposite side featured a sleek workstation with multiple monitors. "This is your idea of a rustic cabin?" Emma couldn't help asking as she took in the sophisticated space. A ghost of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "I've never been particularly outdoorsy. This was my compromise. Nature viewed through triple-pane glass with high-speed internet." Reed wasted no time establishing their temporary command center at the workstation. "I need a secure connection to upload this evidence to the department server," he said, gesturing to the evidence drive. "The connection is encrypted," Sophia confirmed, activating the system. "Military grade. My father taught me the value of privacy, ironically enough." As Reed and Sophia worked to establish communication with the authorities, Emma led Ranger to a soft rug near the fireplace. The German Shepherd was fighting exhaustion, his training warring with his physical limitations. Emma carefully changed his bandages, relieved to find the wound still clean despite their ordeal. "You've done enough, boy," she murmured, stroking his head. "Time to rest now." For once, Ranger seemed to agree, settling onto the rug with a deep sigh. His eyes remained open, tracking the movements of everyone in the room, but his rigid vigilance had softened slightly. Abby joined them by the fireplace, her academic composure giving way to visible fatigue. "I never imagined it would come to this," she said quietly. "When I joined Novatech, I thought we were going to help people, cure Alzheimer's." She trailed off, shaking her head. "How does someone like Elijah Holt justify risking thousands of lives for profit?" "My father has always been exceptional at compartmentalizing," Sophia answered from across the room, her voice carrying a lifetime of complicated emotions. "He sees the bigger picture, the millions who might benefit, and considers the casualties acceptable losses, statistical anomalies." She turned back to the computer screen, her expression hardening. "I used to admire his clarity of purpose. Now I see it for what it is, moral blindness." Reed ended a call and turned to address the group. "I've spoken directly with District Attorney Vasquez. She's reviewing the evidence now and preparing to request an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. She's also assigned a protective detail to meet us here within the hour." "Will it be enough?" Emma asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Before Reed could answer, Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears swiveling toward the front of the cabin. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he struggled to his feet, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the windows. Reed immediately drew his weapon. "Kill the lights," he ordered, moving swiftly to a defensive position. Sophia complied, plunging the cabin into darkness broken only by the faint glow of computer monitors and moonlight filtering through the windows. In the shadows, Emma could see Ranger's tense posture, his focus unwavering despite his injury. "Could be the protective detail arriving early," Reed whispered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "My father wouldn't give up so easily," Sophia countered, her voice barely audible. "Not with billions at stake." Through the window, Emma caught a flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper darkness of the forest. Then another. Ranger's growl deepened, confirming her fears. "They found us," she breathed. Reed motioned them toward the back of the cabin. "There's a panic room behind the master bedroom," Sophia whispered. "Steel-reinforced, separate communication system." As they moved silently through the darkened cabin, the unmistakable sound of a helicopter approached from the distance, too coincidental to be unrelated to their situation. "How many exits?" Reed asked Sophia urgently. "3. Front door, side entrance by the kitchen, and a back door leading to the dock," she replied. "The panic room is our best option." They had nearly reached the master bedroom when the front windows exploded inward, showering the cabin with glass as smoke grenades rolled across the floor. Acrid smoke billowed through the space, and the distinctive red dots of laser sights danced across the walls. "Move!" Reed shouted, abandoning stealth as he fired toward the broken windows, providing cover as they ran. Emma felt Ranger press against her legs, herding her toward safety with remarkable coordination despite the chaos. They burst into the master bedroom, Sophia leading them toward a bookcase that concealed the panic room entrance. The sound of the helicopter grew deafening as it hovered directly above the cabin, searchlights stabbing through the smoke-filled interior. More windows shattered, and the unmistakable sound of boots on hardwood indicated their pursuers had entered the cabin. Sophia frantically worked the hidden mechanism to open the panic room, her composed exterior finally cracking under the pressure. "It's jammed," she hissed. "The power surge must have affected the lock." Reed positioned himself at the bedroom doorway, weapon ready. "I'll hold them off. Find another way out." "The dock," Sophia suggested desperately. "There's a boat." Her words were cut short as a figure appeared in the doorway, not from the living room where Reed was focused, but from the ensuite bathroom. Nathan Drake stood before them, weapon raised, his expression coldly professional. "That's enough," he said quietly. "It's over." Reed spun to face the new threat, but Drake was faster, firing a shot that caught the lieutenant in the shoulder, sending him crashing against the wall. "Lieutenant!" Emma cried, moving toward him only to freeze as Drake turned his weapon toward her. "Don't," Drake advised calmly. "I have no desire to harm any of you unnecessarily, but I will if you force my hand." Ranger moved protectively in front of Emma, his hackles raised and teeth bared despite his injury. Drake regarded the German shepherd with something like professional respect. "R7, he said, using Ranger's official designation from Sentinel. "Stand down." Ranger's growl only intensified, his training to obey Sentinel commands clearly overridden by his loyalty to Emma. Drake sighed. "A shame. You were one of our finest assets." He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Ranger's head. "But assets that malfunction must be retired." Time seemed to slow as Drake's finger tightened on the trigger. Emma saw Ranger tensing to lunge, a desperate protective move that would almost certainly end in his death. In that fractional moment of suspended reality, she reached for him, wanting at least to touch him one last time. Then, without warning, Sophia Holt slammed into Drake from the side, sending his shot wide. The bullet splintered the wooden headboard as they crashed to the floor, struggling for control of the weapon. "Run!" Sophia screamed, her elegant composure abandoned as she fought with unexpected ferocity. Reed, despite his injury, staggered to his feet and grabbed the evidence drive from Abby. "Get to the dock," he ordered, pressing the drive into Emma's hand. "This is what they want. Keep it safe." Emma hesitated, torn between fleeing and helping Reed, who was clearly in no condition to escape. "Go," he insisted, drawing his backup weapon with his good arm. "Ranger needs you. The evidence needs you." With a final agonizing glance at Reed and Sophia still wrestling with Drake, Emma turned and fled toward the back of the cabin, with Ranger limping determinedly at her side and Abby close behind. They burst through the rear door onto a wooden deck illuminated by the helicopter's searchlight sweeping overhead. Below, a short path led to a dock where a sleek motorboat was moored. Gunfire erupted from inside the cabin as they raced down the path. Emma tried not to think about what that meant for Reed and Sophia, focusing instead on their narrow chance of escape. The evidence drive felt impossibly heavy in her pocket, a small device containing truth that powerful men would kill to suppress. They reached the dock just as armed figures emerged onto the deck behind them. Abby scrambled into the boat, frantically searching for keys while Emma helped Ranger aboard, his injury making the leap difficult. "They must be here somewhere," Abby muttered, rifling through compartments beneath the steering console. "Looking for these," a voice called from the shoreline. Emma turned to see a tall man in tactical gear dangling a set of keys. Behind him, more operatives were approaching along the dock, weapons raised. They were trapped. "Step away from the boat," the man ordered. "Hands where we can see them." Emma glanced at Ranger, who stood unsteadily in the boat, his breathing labored but his eyes alert. Even wounded and exhausted, he remained ready to fight, to protect her until his last breath. She couldn't let that happen. "Okay," she called, raising her hand slowly. "Don't shoot. We're coming out." "Emma, no," Abby protested in a whisper. "Trust me," Emma murmured back. Then, keeping her movements deliberate, she stepped onto the dock, positioning herself between the approaching men and the boat. "What happens now?" she asked, stalling for time as her mind raced. The lead operative gestured with his weapon. "Now you give us the drive and this ends quietly." "And if I refuse?" The man's expression remained impassive. "Then it ends loudly. Either way, it ends." From inside the boat, Ranger growled low in his throat. The operative glanced at him dismissively. "Control your dog or we will." Emma felt a surge of desperate inspiration. If she couldn't save herself, perhaps she could still save the evidence. And Ranger. Her hand moved slowly toward her pocket where the drive was hidden. "I'll give you what you want," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Just don't hurt anyone else." As her fingers closed around the drive, she turned slightly toward the boat. Ranger was watching her intently, and in that moment Emma knew he would understand what she needed him to do. "Ranger," she said clearly, using the precise tone from their training sessions. "Water retrieve. Deep water retrieve." Then, in one fluid motion, she flung the evidence drive far out into the dark lake. The reaction was instantaneous. The lead operative lunged toward her with a curse, but Ranger was already in motion. The German Shepherd launched himself over the side of the boat, slicing through the water with powerful strokes despite his injury, heading directly for where the small device had disappeared beneath the surface. "Shoot the dog!" someone shouted. "No!" Emma cried, throwing herself at the nearest operative as shots rang out, sending water spouts erupting around Ranger's swimming form. Chaos erupted on the dock. Abby had seized the moment to grab an emergency flare from the boat, igniting it in a blinding crimson blaze that momentarily disoriented the armed men. Emma fought desperately, knowing she needed to buy Ranger just a few more seconds to reach the drive and dive with it. A sharp blow to her temple sent Emma sprawling on the wooden planks. Through blurred vision, she saw Ranger reach the spot where the drive had sunk, then disappear beneath the surface. The operatives lined up along the dock, weapons trained on the water, waiting for him to resurface. But Ranger didn't come up where they expected. Trained in underwater retrieval techniques for his work with Sentinel, he swam some distance beneath the surface before emerging silently behind the dock, invisible to those standing above. The lead operative grabbed Emma by the hair, pulling her to her feet. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where's the dog?" Before she could answer, the night exploded with sound and light. Police sirens wailed from the access road, and powerful spotlights suddenly illuminated the entire lakefront. The protective detail Reed had called finally arriving. At the same moment, the cabin's exterior lights blazed to life, revealing a scene of tactical officers surrounding the structure. "Mapleton Police," boomed an amplified voice. "Drop your weapons and surrender." The operative holding Emma hesitated, his mission collapsing around him. In that moment of uncertainty, Emma drove her elbow hard into his solar plexus, breaking free as he doubled over. She scrambled away as gunfire erupted, the cornered operatives choosing to fight rather than surrender. Emma crawled beneath the dock, searching desperately for Ranger. "Ranger," she called softly. "Where are you, boy?" A wet nose touched her hand in the darkness. Ranger had made his way to shore and now crouched beside her, soaking wet but alive. In his mouth, he gently held the evidence drive, sealed in its waterproof casing. Good boy, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face as she embraced him, not caring about the cold water soaking into her clothes. The best boy. Above them, the gunfight was short-lived. Outnumbered and surrounded, the operatives were quickly subdued by the police tactical team. As officers secured the scene, Emma emerged from beneath the dock with Ranger at her side, the precious drive still held carefully in his jaws. Detective Morales rushed toward them, relief evident on his face. "Ms. Chen, are you all right? Lieutenant Reed radioed that you had the evidence." "Reed's alive?" Emma asked, hope surging through her. "Wounded but stable," Morales confirmed. "He and Ms. Holt managed to subdue Drake until our team arrived." "Dr. Wright?" "I'm here," Abby called, emerging shakily from where she'd taken cover in the boat. "The evidence?" In answer, Ranger padded forward and gently placed the drive in Morales' outstretched hand. "Did he just—" Morales trailed off, staring at the German Shepherd in amazement. "He did," Emma confirmed, kneeling beside Ranger, who was finally showing signs of exhaustion, his injured leg trembling with the effort of remaining standing. "He's been protecting this evidence since the beginning, since they tried to kill him to keep the truth buried." As medical personnel arrived to treat the injured, Emma remained by Ranger's side while a paramedic examined him. The German Shepherd's extraordinary journey, from being shot and buried alive to helping expose a dangerous corporate conspiracy, was nearing its conclusion. His eyes, though tired, remained alert, watching as officers secured the evidence and took statements. "What happens now?" Emma asked Detective Morales as they watched the operatives being loaded into police vehicles. "Now we move quickly," he replied. "The DA is already processing the evidence. With what we have, the clinical data, the testimony, the armed assault against police officers, she's confident we can stop the merger before the announcement tomorrow." Emma nodded, stroking Ranger's damp fur. "And Elijah Holt." Morales' expression hardened. "Officers are on their way to arrest him now. His daughter has provided a statement detailing his involvement in the cover-up and the attempts to eliminate witnesses." He glanced at Ranger with newfound respect, "including your remarkable four-legged friend here." As dawn broke over the lake, casting golden light across the water, Emma sat on the dock with Ranger's head in her lap. The German Shepherd had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his eyes closed in well-deserved rest. In sleep he looked like any other dog, peaceful, vulnerable, ordinary. But Emma knew the truth. There was nothing ordinary about Ranger. He had defied death, exposed corruption, and protected the innocent with a courage and intelligence that transcended species. 3 months later, Emma stood in the sunlit courtyard of the newly established Ranger Center for Animal Cognition and Welfare, watching as construction workers installed the final panel of the building's sign. The modern facility, built on land donated by Sophia Holt, would soon house the most advanced animal cognition research program in the country, alongside a rehabilitation center for service animals and a training facility for specialized therapy dogs. Ranger sat beside her, his posture regal, despite the slight limp that remained from his ordeal. The white patch on his chest was now complemented by a specially designed service vest that identified him as both the center's namesake and its first official ambassador. His days of security work were behind him, but his extraordinary cognitive abilities would help researchers develop new approaches to animal-assisted therapy and interspecies communication. "What do you think, boy?" Emma asked, smiling as Ranger studied the building with apparent approval. "Not bad for 3 months' work." "Not bad at all," agreed Lieutenant, now Captain Marcus Reed, as he approached, walking with the aid of a cane. His shoulder had healed well after the confrontation at the cabin, though his doctors warned he might never regain full range of motion. The promotion had been both a recognition of his role in exposing the NV-237 scandal and a practical accommodation for his injury. "The first research teams arrive next week," Emma told him, accepting the folder he handed her. Dr. Sanderson is bringing her veterinary students for orientation on Monday. Reed nodded, his gaze moving to the sprawling facility. Hard to believe how much has changed in 3 months. Indeed, the weeks following that fateful night at the cabin had seen a whirlwind of developments. The evidence Ranger had protected so determinedly had been devastating, not just for Holt Pharmaceuticals but for the entire pharmaceutical regulatory system. Elijah Holt had been arrested in his office the morning after the Lake House confrontation, still working on his merger announcement speech when officers arrived. The expression on his face, captured by news cameras as he was led from the building in handcuffs, had become one of the defining images of the scandal. Nathan Drake and several other Sentinel executives had also been charged, their trials set to begin in the coming months. The fallout had extended far beyond criminal charges. Congressional hearings on pharmaceutical testing protocols had been fast-tracked, with both Abby Wright and Sophia Holt providing key testimony. Sentinel security had collapsed under the weight of the scandal, its more ethical employees and properly trained dogs redistributed to reputable agencies. Most importantly, NV-237 had been permanently shelved, its development halted before it could harm a single patient. The scientific community was now working to understand how the fatal side effects had been missed or deliberately obscured in the approval process, determined to prevent similar oversights in the future. "Have you seen the latest from the DA's office?" Reed asked, gesturing to the folder Emma now held. She opened it, scanning the contents quickly. "Elijah Holt is pleading guilty? I thought he was fighting every charge." "The evidence was too overwhelming, especially after Sophia agreed to testify," Reed explained. "He's hoping for leniency in sentencing, but with 18 counts of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder, he'll still spend the rest of his life in prison." Emma closed the folder, her thoughts turning to Sophia, who had risked everything to expose her father's crimes. After providing crucial testimony, she had disappeared from public view, emerging weeks later with a plan to convert her family's considerable remaining assets to funding research ethics initiatives, including the Ranger Center. "How's Sophia doing with all this?" Emma asked. Reed's expression softened slightly. "As well as can be expected. Dismantling your father's corrupt legacy while trying to build something positive in its place isn't easy, but she's remarkably resilient." The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. Abby Wright walked toward them, accompanied by a small group of graduate students who gazed in undisguised awe at Ranger. "Our first tour group has arrived," Abby announced, having accepted the position of research director at the center. The scandal had transformed her from a reluctant whistleblower to a leading voice in research ethics reform. "They're particularly interested in meeting the hero of the hour." Ranger, sensing he was the center of attention, sat up straighter, his intelligent eyes assessing the newcomers. "Remember," Emma told the students as they gathered around, "Ranger isn't just exceptional because of his training. He made choices, moral choices, that went beyond his programming. When he was buried alive, he could have run anywhere after escaping the clinic. Instead, he sought out someone he trusted to help expose the truth." One of the students, a young woman with bright, curious eyes, knelt to Ranger's level. "May I?" she asked Emma before extending her hand. Emma nodded, and Ranger gently placed his paw in the student's outstretched palm, a behavior he had been taught as part of his communication training. "That's amazing," the student breathed. "It's almost like shaking hands." "It's exactly like shaking hands," Emma corrected with a smile. Ranger understands the social significance of the gesture: greeting, trust, connection. His cognitive abilities allow him to grasp abstract concepts that most animals can't process. As Abby led the students into the building for their orientation, Reed turned to Emma. "The media is still requesting interviews, you know. The story of the German Shepherd who survived being buried alive to expose a deadly conspiracy continues to fascinate people." Emma shook her head. Ranger's done enough. He deserves privacy now, not more cameras and questions. Reed nodded in understanding. Fair enough, though I'm not sure the film producers will give up so easily. 3 different studios have contacted the department about rights to the story. They can keep trying, Emma replied firmly. Some things aren't for sale. As they walked toward the building's main entrance, Emma reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. From an animal behaviorist struggling to make ends meet to the director of a cutting-edge research center, with Ranger now permanently by her side, the transformation seemed almost unbelievable. The courtyard they crossed featured a simple memorial, a sculpture of a German shepherd emerging from darkness into light, with a plaque that read, "In honor of Ranger, who returned from the grave to protect the truth, and in memory of all animals who have served humanity without recognition or choice." Inside the center's main hall, photographs lined the walls documenting Ranger's extraordinary journey, from his early training at Sentinel to his dramatic rescue and recovery. The final image showed him sitting alert and dignified beside Emma at the congressional hearings, where his presence had served as a powerful reminder of what the proceedings were truly about. "You know what still amazes me?" Reed said as they paused before this last photograph. That night at the lake when he dove underwater to retrieve the evidence drive. That wasn't just training. That was understanding the stakes, making a choice to act despite his injury. Emma nodded, remembering the heart-stopping moments when Ranger had disappeared beneath the dark water, bullets striking around him. He's always been exceptional, but I think nearly dying gave him something more, a purpose beyond obedience, a desire to protect not just people, but truth. Ranger looked up at her as if understanding her words, his brown eyes reflecting an intelligence that researchers were only beginning to comprehend. Emma knelt beside him, gently touching the scar on his shoulder, a permanent reminder of how close they had come to losing him and all he represented. "The world knows you're a hero now," she told him softly. "But I think you always were, even before all this. You just needed the chance to show it." Ranger pressed his muzzle against her hand in that subtle gesture of affection he reserved only for her. Around them, the center hummed with activity. Researchers preparing laboratories, construction workers finishing interior spaces, administrative staff setting up offices. A place of discovery and healing, built on the foundation of one dog's extraordinary courage. As the afternoon sun streamed through the skylights, casting golden patches across the polished floors, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness. Ranger had come home to her that rainy morning, half dead on her doorstep, because he had recognized in her someone who would understand what he had witnessed, someone who would help him protect others. In saving him, she had enabled him to save countless unknown others who would never know his name, and in the process they had both found their true purpose. "Come on, boy," Emma said, rising to her feet. "We've got work to do." Ranger stood beside her, alert and ready despite his scars, his extraordinary journey from death to life having transformed not just his own fate, but the world around him. Together, they walked forward into the light, toward a future neither could have imagined when a buried German shepherd had fought his way home to change everything.